Welcome, sports fans, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of Virtual Sports Beat. I'm your host, Ryan Yee. Coming up, all the latest in the MLB, NFL, NHL, and NBA. Don't go anywhere. Sports Beat. So glad you can join us tonight. It is all about the professional sports world tonight. The latest happenings in MLB, NFL, NHL, and NBA. And like always, our expert analysis are ready to go. Breaking down all the latest in the four big market sports leagues. We also have interviews with NHL and MLB networks. Keith Gutierrez and a talk as well. And we have WFAN sports talk Daniel McCurran, Danico, and News 12 sports broadcaster Pat O'Keefe. Don't want to miss any of it. As always, we want you to get involved. So leave us a comment down below on our YouTube feed and be a part of our discussion. Send us a question, share with us your take. We'll do our best to bring you on as part of a conversation. Well, it's time to dive right into it. We're going to start with the MLB discussion of the latest happenings going around in the baseball world. It's time to bring on Lou Acimano and Louis Grasso. Now, guys, we'll dive right into it. I feel like the professional sports world is going haywire right now with how it's been affected with the coronavirus pandemic. So let's talk about how the baseball world has been shocked by that. A little bit different here than the other sports. I mean, when it comes to the NHL and NBA particularly, they were in mid-season form, and it came up in the middle of the season, suspension indefinitely. MLB was just about a couple weeks away from getting the season going, and then all of a sudden, the indefinite suspension due to coronavirus. Pretty shocking reaction. Now, as the time has gone on, we have been able to kind of get a sense of what the MLB is going to do to try to get the season going and try to savor what is the left of this summer season. One of the interesting tidbits that they did bring up was maybe condensing the divisions, having 3 divisions of 10 teams. Guys, when you first heard that, what was your initial reaction?
Right. I thought that was a great idea. I'm not going to lie to you. The fact that, we were only a couple weeks away from finishing spring training and going to opening day, and the fact that that got taken away and we had no idea if we were going to have a season or not. And now we're in the talks of at least having the season and this modified schedule or season, if you may call it that. The fact that instead of playing the regular 162 games, condensing it to 100 games, that makes it easier on everybody. It makes it easier on the teams. And the fact that, even though we might not play in, arenas with fans, that's fine. I just want to have a season personally.
Exactly. I feel the same exact way. My first initial reaction for this whole thing was it was a little weird, but at the same time, like Lou said, we just want baseball back. They split it into the 3 regions, Central, East, and West, mix of AL and NL teams. So the cool thing is you get to see some cool matchups that generally you wouldn't get to see. You could see a Garrett Cole versus Harper multiple times. It may be hard to get used to, but in my opinion, it's better than the original plan that they were going to go with, the Grapefruit and the Cactus League. Not having the Red Sox and the Yankees in the same division still boggles my mind, but now they got it back in order by region. So there's just still a lot left in the air. Do they carry out an all-star game if they start in June? How can they do that if they begin just weeks before the scheduled time in July?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. I feel like there's going to be a little bit of tug and pull between the traditional baseball fans and also maybe the newcomers and the new age fans where, a lot of people look forward to those Boston Red Sox, New York Yankees matchups. And to now have that, new division kind of lineup, you're going to have new matchups. It's definitely going to be an interesting dynamic. But you guys mentioned about a shortened season. If the MLB is to come back, that is going to be the case. Now, with baseball, out of all things, players go through hot streaks and lose and cold streaks. Teams go through massive winning streaks and massive losing streaks. But now, when you're condensing it down to 100 games or less, really, it's anyone's game. So for you guys, what teams out there in the MLB have the biggest advantage, or even players have the biggest advantage by having that shortened season? I think it's going to change a lot.
Ryan, when you look at how a lot of storylines transpired, I have to look at the New York Yankees. The fact that they just got Garrett Cole and a couple players on the roster were still injured. The fact that this time frame allows them for everyone to heal up and get ready and prepare for this season. They need those star players like Aaron Judge, like Giancarlo Stanton to come back, hit the ball, and play the sport. And the fact that this happened is beneficial for them because there was so much hype around this team.
Yeah, like Lou said, with the Yankees, I'll start with the Yankees. They had injured players, like he said, like Aaron Judge, like Giancarlo Stanton, who are the face of the Yankees, of that franchise. The Yankees always suffer from those preseason injuries as usual. And now with this delayed and shortened season, maybe it could help them out in that way, but it can also hurt players. It can hurt players who only have 1 year left in their contracts, and they only have these last months before entering free agency. This is their time for getting contracts in the future. So it could potentially hurt them. And I think another person that's been in the media a lot is AJ Hinch and the Astros. And for him, he was suspended the entire 2020 season. If there's no play at all, it doesn't even seem like you're really suspended, and it doesn't really seem like you're carrying that out, but it is counting for this year. So if there is a shortened season and there's not play for a little bit, it does benefit him in that way too.
And I guess also a silver lining in this, or I should say an interesting experiment. I mean, there's always been a lot of talks about shortening the MLB season because people think that it is maybe a little bit too long, a little bit too drawn out. So maybe if they do come back, it'll be an interesting test to see how that really goes. And I just want to mention quickly to all of our viewers, make sure you're commenting down below if you want to get involved in this MLB discussion or any of the discussions that we have later on with the NFL, NBA, or NHL. We want you to be involved, and we'll try to bring you on as part of the conversation. But one more question here for you guys before we bring on our special guest and Keith Irizarry, NHL Network, MLB Network host, and of course a Hofstra alum. But guys, before we get there, you mentioned it, Lou, about how the fact they're going to be potential, or the most likely will be empty stadiums when these teams play. And I don't know if you guys saw the video. I know some Japanese leagues overseas have gone back to play, and they literally have cardboard cutouts of fans in the seats. But besides that point and how odd that may look, I mean, fans are a huge part of the environment, especially in baseball. I mean, you look at some of the postseason atmospheres that you're seeing at Yankee Stadium where you have the crowd filled out, yelling, screaming, getting to the other team's head. I mean, fans have a huge impact, and to not have them at the stadium, I mean, what is going to be that effect on the field for you guys?
Ryan, the fact that home field atmosphere is going to be very different. You hear a lot of people talk about, playing at Yankee Stadium, the fans are crazy. If there's no fans there, is it going to really be that crazy? Or are people just going to be there in your imagination and just be like, behind home plate chirping at you? No, it's not. It's going to be totally different. And the fact that, millions of people will be watching, I know we're not going to have fans at the stadium. People are going to be watching from home. But, when it's all said and done, they only have one real advantage, and it's them being home. They didn't have a flight. They're well rested, and they're used to the field. That's the real advantage. But the real deal breaker are the fans, and just for that just being taken away is just disheartening.
Not having fans is extremely tough, but like we've said, it's the right decision. Lives have been lost. Families have been broken. We can't mess around with this anymore. It's on that next level. But going back to the fans, they're the lifeline of teams. I know myself personally, I go to multiple Yankee games a year. I go to at least one with my dad, with friends. I've been to walk-off games. I've been to playoff games. Like that electricity, I can't imagine people playing without that electricity in Major League Baseball. There's a lot up in the air. How many games are we going to play? Are people going to have their contracts? There's a lot to talk about. But as sports journalists and sports broadcasters, that's why we go on these shows and we talk and we have fun and we're optimistic for the future. And that's why I'm so excited to bring on my guest right now for this exclusive interview, Hofstra alumni Keith Irizarry. He's been a national television and radio personality for over a decade. He is with the NHL Network, MLB Network, CBS Sports, and more, continuing to do shows from home via social media on Instagram. And, I want to thank him for joining us on the show. If he is, we might be having some technical difficulties here, but it is tough. But here we go.
I'm right here. What's up, Lou? How you doing, man?
I'm great. Thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
awesome to talk to you as well. Show's great, man. You guys really sound very knowledgeable, knocking it out the park. Really enjoyable.
I appreciate that so much. And I want to get right into it. With all this going on and you having to resume work from home, how has this affected you and your career during this national pandemic?
I mean, I think it affects a lot of people. Obviously, it affects people health-wise too. But if you're just talking about career-wise, yeah, I mean, for NHL Network, we are doing limited amount of shows with the amount of on-air talent that's there. I mean, there are times where we go 4 or 5 weeks without actually even doing something fully, unless it's just, social media related. This does afford me a little bit of time to become a little extra creative, go down some paths of things that I've always wanted to try. And we're getting an opportunity to do that in my home studio right here.
Yeah, I've been seeing that. I've seen you on social media, keeping it going. Like I said, doing the best that you can. It's been difficult for broadcasters during this time, but like I said, it's been really difficult to be a sports fan right now, and especially being a baseball fan, because the season was right there. It was 2 weeks away when basketball was called off, the NCAA tournament and everything. Although controlling this pandemic and saving lives is more important than resuming sports at this time, what are your thoughts on MLB's new idea to begin the season in late June?
Selfishly, as a fan of the sport and as someone who covers the sport, I just want it back as soon as possible. Obviously, with all of the safety issues need to be implemented correctly. It's scary to think about, players playing and potentially getting ill or getting other people ill. Obviously, people that are smarter than you and I will figure all of that part out. But I don't have a problem with the 3 divisions if they were to go to this. They seemingly broke it up, whether it's natural rivals or it's, kind of proximity rivals. And the only odd one is that the Braves in the Central seem a little bit weird to me. Otherwise, I didn't have a major problem with it. And Lewis, I mean, I grew up in an era where there wasn't AL playing versus NL games. When I was younger, that didn't happen. Now there is. So that's why these divisions don't sound that weird to me.
Exactly. I think, like I said earlier in the show, it's going to be really cool to see some of those matchups, some AL, NL matchups. I think we got a lot to look forward to. But something else that we had to look forward to, like I said, has been the 2020 season, the first season of the new decade. There was a lot to look forward to. Garrett Cole signs a monster deal to the Yankees. The Astros and the Red Sox cheating scandals are concluded. And some of the top stars in today's game, such as Mookie Betts and Anthony Rendon, made historic decisions during this past free agency. Now, with all this excitement heading into the 2020 season, do you believe the season will still bring that same electricity, even though they'd only play 100 games and have no fans in the stadiums?
I do. And I think if for nothing else, I heard what the other Lou was talking about too, with the electricity in a stadium. That being said, we are all as sports fans yearning for sports. I think that if you give it to us, we will be excited about it. And I want to maybe take the other side of the coin a little bit with, how well can people play without the electricity of the fans, right? Like if we're talking about that, I mean, you can go back to your high school days. We didn't all have fans, crazy, rabid fans. We still were able to hit the ball. I say the Major League Baseball players, not you and I maybe, but we're able to hit the ball, catch the ball. And maybe this does level the playing field a little bit. So maybe, the New York Yankees or the Philadelphia Phillies, who have these crazy fans, and the Tampa Bay Rays, who kind of don't, now they can kind of meet in the middle and we really see who the best team is.
I think that's a really good point. I didn't even think about that, but that makes a lot of sense. And this plan still isn't confirmed. There's a lot up in the air, but it's optimistic. We're excited to see what's going to happen. But with the luck of the world recently, it's just as likely it may not start at that time. Like I said, Mookie Betts has been a star in the American League since his debut, traded to the Dodgers this offseason with 1 year remaining in his contract. If the season doesn't begin, the last year of these contracts would be wasted money, and that's from a business standpoint. But for the players, with only 1 year left in their contracts, how do you believe that this can affect them heading into the 2021 free agency?
So this is such a difficult thing to kind of decipher, right? Because on one hand, you sit there and you go, it stinks. These guys can't show out necessarily and try to earn more money. On the other side, we are in the midst of a global pandemic. And you would hope that these team owners and general managers and team presidents would look at player X and say, all right, let me base this off of what he did the previous year in 2019, and I'm not going to base this off of, I didn't see him play over the last 9 months or 8 months. I would hope that there would be some sort of compassion in that. But you said the right word, the B word, right? It is a business, so that's where it does get a little scary.
Definitely. It's going to make for an exciting 2021 free agency. Whatever happens, free agency always does seem to be the highlight of the offseason. But this past offseason was not only historic due to the free agency signings, but also the drama. Shortly after the 2019 season, it was revealed that the Astros had cheated during their 2017 championship year. And then shortly after that, the Red Sox were reported to have been cheating during their 2018 championship year. So once this pandemic is under control and the season does finally return, do you think that players and fans will still hate on the Astros and the Red Sox, or do you think that most people will just be grateful to see baseball back?
So I think that most people will be grateful to have baseball back, but I do believe that everyone will still be, banging things whenever the Astros are playing. And even if they're not in stadiums, I think they might be home banging things, and they might still be hating the Astros and probably still hating the Red Sox, although maybe not as much as the Astros. Listen, it was a national story, and we covered it ad nauseum, trying to break down, did Altuve really have a buzzer? How much cheating was going on? How much covering up was going on? And what did it do? It unified most of the fans, right? Because typically, and you're a Yankee fan, I heard you saying that, and so am I, or at least I grew up a Yankee fan, people tend to hate the Yankees or hate the Red Sox. And that's kind of like it, right? Now everyone forgets about hating the Yankees, forget about hating this team. You all have that one tunnel vision view right here. Let's all hate on the Astros because they cheat. And I think that could be almost unifying also.
I think so too. I've seen multiple players come together on all different teams, opposing teams, and have the same thoughts on this. But even the biggest scandals and topics that once took over of sports media can be shadowed by a pandemic like we're facing right now. We've seen a lot of destruction and sadness. However, as journalists and broadcasters, we must keep going. You've continued working from home, like I said multiple times, posting your shows on social platforms such as Instagram to reach your viewers. And to finish off here, for broadcasters and sports personalities such as yourself who work in person with other analysts, what are your thoughts on when your work is going to return back on set and back to normal as opposed to working from the safety of your home?
Back to normal. I don't even know what normal is right now. And that's what the scary thing is. And the fact that we have no idea when a vaccine is going to be around. I'm not trying to get too far into the weeds with COVID-19 or coronavirus and what's to come down the road. But yeah, I don't know when it is time to be back in a studio, and when, hopefully the NFL season is back, and let's say September, I'm in a CBS Sports Network studio and we're taping Tops and we're doing it live. Sure, I think it's going to be odd, because I think that all of us in the back of our minds are still going to be worried about coronavirus. I mean, as simple as going to the supermarket, I got to be honest with you, I still haven't done. We are more than 7 weeks into this, and I am 100% keeping myself quarantined. Me, my wife, and my 2 children, we stay in the home. We shoot some hoops. We go in the backyard. Those are the things that we do. It's a scary world we live in right now, and I don't know how we'll adjust. I just hope that we find a way to, and I'm kind of looking forward to trying.
Exactly. It is a scary world, but we adjust to everything. We have to adjust to this. Life has to go on. Work has to go on. And like I said, this is all we can do. We just have to be optimistic and excited for the future. But thank you so much. That's going to wrap up this exclusive interview with Hofstra alumni sports personality Keith Irizarry. Thank you for joining me, and hopefully we will see our favorite players back on the diamond real soon.
You're the man, Lou. Good stuff.
All right. Thanks so much.
Always some great stuff, guys. I mean, Keith Irizarry, Hofstra alum, one of the guys that I know that we all look up to and strive to in terms of what we want to be as sports broadcasters. So thank you again to him for joining us. But some interesting tidbits there for this his mindset and his kind of perspective on this whole baseball situation. I think the thing that stood out to me, and Lewis, I think this also stood out to you as well, throwing it a little bit back to the high school days, having those no fans. I didn't really think about it like that, but it will be interesting to see how there will be an even playing field. The Yankees are not going to have that big of an advantage over, let's say, a Tampa Bay Rays. They're both going to have no fans there. And yeah, you're throwing it a little bit back to those amateur days where you're playing in some random ballpark where there are no fans. It's just your parents that are cheering you on. It's definitely an interesting one. What kind of stood out to you guys?
Well, Ryan, Keith really did it justice. Honestly, he played both sides of the coin. We don't know what it's going to be like, and honestly, with this neutral playing field, anything's up for grabs. I mean, everything might have been overhyped in 2019. Signing that Garrett Cole for the Yankees and having all these people back. For this season, it could be really good and live up to that hype, or it could have just been like, man, I really wish it wasn't like this.
Something I picked out really quickly about Keith was that he's just such a down-to-earth person. Even just researching him before the interview, I saw he was just keeping it going, just such a positive role model in the sports world and someone that I look up to definitely. And he's staying positive during this time, and I think that's all we can do, and I respect it a lot. So that's what I took out of it.
Well, Lewis, thank you so much for joining us. I know, Lou, we're going to have you back on quickly a little bit later for another discussion on the NBA. But until then, we are going to switch over to the gridiron, talk a little bit about the NFL. If there's one sport that we were able to kind of digest to get our sports cravings going, it was the NFL, wrapping up the draft just a week ago, this past weekend. Lots of interesting stuff. So it's time to bring on Eddie Fitzgerald, Max Sacco, to start talking a little bit about that. Now, guys, like I said, the NFL at least gave us something to grasp in terms of sports and something to digest with that draft kind of passing by this past weekend. Very interesting. I know we've all had discussions about it and the things that we saw, but let me throw it to you right off the bat here. Winners and losers. Who do you think guys did well at the draft? Who do you guys think did not so well?
Well, I'm going to stick in New York for both my winner and my loser. The main winner that I saw out of this draft was the New York Giants, to be honest with you. I think Dave Gettleman knocked it out of the park on this one. He got the safest prospect in Andrew Thomas out of Georgia, hit it on the second round, picking up Xavier McKinney in the safety out of Alabama, who is going to be amazing outside of Julian Love and Jabril Peppers. The cover three is going to be awesome with McKinney rolling around the middle. You got Matt Pert, who is my top offensive lineman outside of the first round, and they got him in the third round at pick 35, which was absolutely amazing. You got Darnay Holmes. Really, I could just name everybody, and we see Joe Judge sort of coming from New England and bringing that Belichick style of team building up that 4-3-3-4 hybrid. And it was really awesome to see that for all Giants fans out there. I'm a little bit remiss as an Eagles fan, but definitely the Giants were able to pick out and fill their needs, but also draft at value. Dave Gettleman doesn't really like to trade back. He's never been one to do that, but everybody just fell. Everybody fell in his lap, and he was able to take the players who he wanted, who he trusted, and so far it's been able to work out for them. I would have to say that my loser now would be the other team in the middle, and that is the New York Jets. They got Mekhi Becton at pick 11, which was pretty solid. If you're assuming that he's going to translate better at the tackle position than a guard position, then taking him over Tristan Wirfs is probably the best move. And then Denzel Mims after that, another good wide receiver, getting Darnold some help for his tertiary campaign in the NFL. But then after that, you're looking at just drafting players who you don't really need. You pick up Ashton Davis, who's a solid. I don't mind Ashton Davis, but you got guys like Marcus May and Jamal Adams there. It's not really great. You're going to have to probably end up trading one of them because you don't end up wanting to pay them. You pick up LaMichael Pirine in the fourth round when you already have Le'Veon Bell. You draft a quarterback just a couple picks later who's going to be a project quarterback. It's not like Jake Fromm from Georgia who could probably step in and be that backup role for you for a cheap cost. The rest of this draft for the Jets was just kind of wayward after the first two rounds. They were just sort of picking players just because they liked them or they thought they were at value, but they didn't fill needs. When you don't fill needs, when you have a young quarterback, that is what is going to cause issues for your NFL franchise.
Well, to continue with the quarterback point here, I think the big winner for me, at least on the college scene, is the Louisiana State University Tigers. One player from each position was picked this round. 22 different positions were picked from Louisiana, and not just speaks to the talent they have down south. I mean, Ed Orgeron coaches a great team. Joe Burrow goes number one. That team was ready. They had a player picked every position or signed. They have a powerful program. It shows in the quality of players that are going to the NFL, and we'll be seeing a lot of the Tigers going forward soon. But the big loser for me is the Green Bay Packers. A first round where they need some offensive help. Aaron Rodgers isn't getting any younger, but he's still producing. It's not like he's getting older and not working. He's still producing as a quarterback. So the pick of Jordan Love at the 26th pick, when you had a lot of options to choose in a very deep wide receiver class, shocked me. And it seems like the Packers are really waving a white flag or telling Aaron Rodgers, get out of here, bud. You have a year left tops before we start replacing you. But he's still producing.
I hate to interrupt you, Ryan, before you ask us another question. I want to back up this Jordan Love hype train a little bit. I think the pick of Jordan Love was absolutely phenomenal. If we go back in history, just even a couple years ago, Kansas City Chiefs had a quarterback in Alex Smith. And what did they do in the first round? They traded up. And they made the playoffs that year. And everybody was upset that they took this guy named Patrick Mahomes. And now look where they're standing. They're standing on the mountaintop. They are winning games. They were able to go and get players in free agency. And then furthermore, if we go back into Packers history, around the 2005 mark, the Packers were just in the playoffs. They were in the NFC Championship game with their quarterback in Brett Favre. And now we have them drafting, who's this guy with the 30th pick? Aaron Rodgers, who then becomes the face of the franchise. So I think Packers have been doing this for generations now. They've been able to get their players. So if you're able to get your quarterback of the future and you like Jordan Love, who I think is tremendously talented, I think that's a great pick. I don't care what anybody says. The best receivers were off the board at that point.
Now, the problem is, though, the Jordan Love hype train, he plays in an easier conference. Utah State is not in a tougher conference to play. And you look at Patrick Mahomes, he played in a tougher conference in the Big 12. He plays in a stacked conference that is known for you need to be offensively sound if you want to jump right in. The Big 12 is known for huge score lines, big offensive plays, not much for defense. He played in that sort of style of play. Also, look at Patrick Mahomes. That's a generational talent you're going to grab. Jordan Love isn't a generational talent. Jordan Love is a good quarterback. Jordan Love is a quarterback that will produce. But he is not the talent like an Aaron Rodgers was coming in to replace Brett Favre or like a Patrick Mahomes for Alex Smith. And Alex Smith's production was already starting to teeter off a bit. It was already said he was going to leave Kansas soon. So there's a lot of ways to look at it, but Jordan Love just was not the right pick at that time for the Packers. They could have waited. He still would have been on the board, and they needed to look at other positions first before they said, let's get the replacement ready.
I love the heat. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's great.
But now, we can talk football, but we have somebody else who can talk football for us a lot better in Danielle McCartan, host on WFAN from her show from 2 to 6 a.m., and also her podcast in Power Players. Danielle, thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, guys. How are you? I'm actually wearing a baseball shirt tonight, but
Right on. Well, I just want to jump into just sort of how you're getting along, working from home, doing stuff with WFAN, and then, of course, you've got your podcast going on. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that as well?
yeah, the thing is, I'm one of the few that cannot work from home from WFAN. I don't have the right equipment to do it here, so I've been on furlough for 3 or 4 weeks now. So it's been kind of tough just because the article came out that said that the part-time hosts, it was an Andrew Marchand article, that part-time hosts were being fired. And then I had people coming to me like, oh my God, you got fired? No, I didn't get fired. It's just temporary. Like, I will be back. The problem is they don't want anybody in the studio, and I don't have the equipment from home to actually do a show from here. So I've been kind of hanging tight. It's been kind of tough, And in the meantime, though, I do have the podcast going. I mean, it's not studio quality by any means, but the interviews are still good. The interviews are still coming. And so it's called Power Players, and it's on the radio.com app. So if you go on radio.com, or I think it's anywhere you get a podcast, you just type in Power Players, and it's like a neon sign looking thing, and you just click on that. It focuses on like the women in sports perspective, which I think is very underlooked and underappreciated, because one thing, talking about the football, everybody's making a big deal about how football was, they put up the first event of the entire, lockdown sports. Actually, they didn't. The WNBA draft was a week before that. They did just as well. Viewership was up, the second highest viewed draft ever. And it was also on ESPN. So I think people need to be made aware of women's sports, because they're good as well. And women in sports. Like, I interviewed Susan Waldman, which I'm sure you guys know, on that podcast. I have a Laura Oakman one ready to drop, Olympians. So it's interesting. And it's a year contract, so I got many more episodes coming up with that. So
Right on.
Yeah, definitely a fun topic, and you definitely do a good podcast as well. I've had a chance to listen to a couple episodes, but you kind of segued us a bit into the NFL here.
Mhm.
For the Jets and the Giants, and even the Bills if you want to go upstate, how do you kind of rank how all three of them did in the draft?
I thought the Jets did excellent. I think the Jets hit the home run. Besides the fact that they took Mekhi Becton, which I didn't like, because I had 2 offensive linemen ranked higher than him from the beginning. I do a lot. If you guys have ever listened to the show or the podcast, you guys know I do a ton of research. And my top 2 coming out were Jedrick Wills and Tristan Wirfs. And they were both still on the board when the Jets picked Mekhi Becton. And I didn't like it. And I didn't like it because the one thing that really stuck out to me when I was researching him was that, we've heard about how huge he is, how big of a monster this guy is. We've heard that. But a lot of the scouting reports said that he doesn't know how to utilize his weight, and he might get hampered by his weight actually at the NFL level. He doesn't know how to utilize it in the right way. For me, that's a big thing. That's not fixable. It's not so easily fixable as something so simple. So he's got to relearn how to play the position or move positions, and see. But after I slept on it, I tweeted that. After I slept on it, it was all right. It was all right. And then for the Giants. What upset me about the Giants' first-round pick is they didn't pick Isaiah Simmons, who was sitting there waiting to be picked by the Giants, and they didn't pull the trigger on him. And what bothered me is that I invest a lot of time and research into Pro Football Focus. Giants' offensive line was like mid-tier. They weren't the worst. The Jets were one of the second to worst, I think, but the Giants' offensive line was mid-tier. So I thought that they could go after Isaiah Simmons, who would make immediate impact on that defense, and then scale back and pick an offensive lineman in the second round. There were still good ones to be had. But their line wasn't as bad as people are making it out to be. Because I was listening or watching. I haven't watched any of these old games on TV yet. Well, I watched 2. Derek Jeter's last game I watched, and the Super Bowl Giants when they beat the Patriots with the helmet catch. But what stuck out to me during that Giants broadcast was all the commentators were saying it was the defensive linemen that were being rotated. It was Michael Strahan, O.C. Umenyiora. It was Justin Tucker. They were fresh all game long. And then I'm thinking, oh my God, they have to take Isaiah Simmons now. And then they didn't. And Dexter Lawrence is a good player. And I think if they paired him with somebody good, they can have something there. So that's why I was so upset with the Giants' first round pick. But who am I?
Now, in terms of the Jets, granted, taking Becton was not your cup of tea over Wirfs. Would you have rather them take their lot of the wide receivers at that point? Because they had Ruggs, Judy, CeeDee Lamb all on the board. Would you rather them go out and get help offensively for Sam rather than waiting and taking Denzel Mims?
Exactly. I don't hate the Mims idea. I think he's going to be a good player. It's just with those 3 guys that you just mentioned sitting there waiting to be taken. As a Jets fan, how many times do I have to watch this revolving door of wide receivers? Sam Darnold hasn't had, a really steady wide receiver. What's his name? Robbie Anderson. Not my favorite. Let's not even go there. But you had just name all the wide receivers. Quincy Enunwa being the main one that they gave him all this money. He's hurt. Is he ever coming back? Who knows? So. Yeah, Sam Darnold is a young guy. He's mobile. He can move around the pocket. I think you needed to get a playmaker on wide receiver because, as far as I'm concerned, the Jets haven't had one. I can't even name you the last one that they had. Maybe it was a tandem of Decker and Marshall together when they broke the touchdown records. But that's it, a tandem. You need 2. You can't just have one. And the Jets don't have that. But maybe in Mims that they will. But that's what I would have done.
And Danielle, before we wrap up here, one last question. From one AFC team to the next, the New England Patriots, Brady leaves. Gronk is now officially off their books now in Tampa Bay. And a lot of people are saying the evil empire has fallen. The Patriots are going to fall flat on their face. Do you still have to worry about New England? Or are we finally going to see a new AFC East champion come to play?
Well, as a Jets fan for my whole life, I root for the Giants too, but I'm more of a Jet fan. I'm hoping that it's the end of the Patriots' reign. But there's 2 things that make me not think so. Well, maybe just one. Guy's name is Bill Belichick. I mean, the guy has a system. He inputs players. They immediately become stars, and he gets rid of them before they can decline in their production. So I wouldn't put anything past Bill Belichick. They might have one down season. Then they're going to go out and get their quarterback, and then they'll be back. But who scares me in the AFC East? The Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills are stacked, and that could be, with Josh Allen, a long time coming. So the Jets need to get their act together because the division is there for the taking.
Danielle, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully this gives a little bit of that WFAN feel, maybe not too much, but sports is sports, and talking sports is always great. So thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, and Joe Reiter says the comment there said the Bills are definitely going to take the AFC.
I'm sure he can hope. But once again, be sure to tune in when she gets back on the air weekdays from 2 a.m. To 6 a.m. Saturday into Sunday, and listen to her Power Players podcast pretty much anywhere you can get a podcast, but specifically on radio.com or the radio.com app. She just dropped one with Monica Abbott talking about softball and how it's coming back to the Olympics. Very cool stuff. Listen to some great interviews. If you're into the female perspective of sports, that is the place to go, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye. Get Ryan on here. Ryan!
Hey, fantastic conversation, guys. Always great to, get the insight into someone that obviously puts so much research and work. And Danielle McCartan obviously doing such a great job with the WFAN and obviously putting out that podcast as well. Such an impactful position there. I absolutely love to see it. But I cannot leave without saying that hearing those remarks about the New England Patriots always hurts me because, yes, I think it might just be the fall of the empire. But I am liking what she's saying about it might just be one down year and maybe get our quarterback coming up. So definitely interesting. But for you guys, what kind of stood out for you?
Well, Ryan, for me, I mean, at least it was the Patriots thing, I think everyone wants to say it's going to be 3, 4, 5 years of them being basement in the AFC East, third, bottom of the AFC. But I never really think about it that Belichick has a system in place to produce stars like that. So maybe that down year for New England is 7-9, 8-8. That's a good year for other teams like the Bears or other teams in the league. An 8-8 season for some is good. For the Patriots, that is an abysmal failure. So maybe a down season, but Ryan, it definitely is going to be tough to see it's going to be tough if they come alive again.
Well, the main thing that I took away is that she disagreed with everything that I said. I said that the Giants were the biggest winners potentially of this draft and that the Jets were one of the biggest losers. And then she completely flip-flopped it on me. But I understand where her point was coming from. I was talking with a lot of Jets and Giants fans that night, and a lot of people were very surprised by the Andrew Thomas pick. A lot of people thought it was going to be Isaiah Simmons. And while Simmons does have that, X factor on defense, I think he'll fit just fine in Arizona. At least he's not in the division, so that's perfectly fine. You don't have to go up against him only in the playoffs potentially. But then I guess the points about the offensive line, I think you always build from the trenches, and to me that was the biggest thing, as well as Becton and the research using Pro Football Focus. I had Becton rated high, not necessarily higher than Wills, but maybe for a tackle as well. I definitely had Becton up there. So it was just really interesting to see the dichotomy between both of our analysis of the New York sports teams draft.
And the draft was pretty chalk in terms of that, but I think the one thing that was kind of off the cuff was the way that the offensive lineman kind of fell in the draft. It kind of took me off guard, but definitely very interesting. I think there's a lot of anxiousness within Giants fans and New York Jets fans to have a good draft. So maybe that adds a little bit of heightness to what's at stake here and picking those players in that past weekend. But Eddie, it was great to have you on, Max. We're going to keep you here to switch this conversation over to hockey. But Eddie, you'll be back on to talk a little bit of hoops a little bit later. So we'll bring you back on in a moment's time. But we're going to bring on David Lazar to talk about what's happening on the ice. Very interesting conversation we have coming up. We do have an exclusive interview with Mr. New Jersey Devil himself, Ken Danico. But let's start with you, David. I mean, this NHL season was right in the full swing of things, and this is the first spurt that we're talking about where the season was put on hold indefinitely, and it was really tough. But for you, David, what was kind of your reaction when literally the season was put at a standstill?
You can't help but feel bad for these players. Their lifestyles, they've been ripped away. And seeing the news that the season was canceled, obviously it's very sad, but you have to put the health of these players first. You saw it in the NBA with Rudy Gobert. That was not an ideal situation. So seeing the NHL season canceled, yes, that puts things in perspective, but it's not totally canceled. It is postponed, and there is a possibility for the season to come back. So nobody wanted this to happen, but fortunately it had to happen. Professional sports needed to be postponed, and hockey is leading the charge now, where we could see a return soon.
I guess we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but I'll hop in on the question. In my opinion, yeah, there'll definitely be an NHL season along with the NBA and hopefully the rest of the sports. The fact that the NBA took a little bit of this position first and then the NHL followed it was great. It was awesome. And hopefully, in time we see all this happen. And the fact that NHL season is a couple weeks before the NBA season starts, they were in that same boat as everybody else. We only had 2 weeks prior before the playoffs started. And you had all those playoff races too, and the wild card. A lot of factors in this dynamic for hockey. And I don't want to take too much of the discussion. I know we had those technical difficulties. I'll let you guys finish it up.
And let's, Max, thank you for joining us. Let's shift over to another question here in terms of what's happening in the NHL. The big one was, especially with the New York teams here, guys, that we had two teams that were really racing for that playoff push. You have the New York Rangers, who seem to be just getting hot at the right time. And then you have the New York Islanders that were just outside that last playoff spot. If the season is to return, what's the best way to go about this? I mean, do you just play the seeding as it is as when the season was canceled? Do you expand it a little bit? Guys, what's your opinion on that?
I think the only way you can take it, Ryan, is you just need to continue from where you left off. I mean, if there's a chance to play games, that'd be great, because there was a lot of races heating up. You look at the Central Wildcard race. You have the Blackhawks outside at 4 points. The Dallas Stars hanging on with just 1 or 2 points into the last spot before they could fall off if they lose a tough game here. A lot of races were close. You look out east, the Islanders, who had a great start, fell off a little bit, but then they were starting to get hot again too. There's too many close calls here that you can just wipe the season and say, okay, we're going to start with these teams in the playoffs. If somebody slips, that's the beauty of the sport, Ryan. We've seen it before. Somebody loses it on deadline day, on the last day of the season. They thought they had a playoff berth and they lose it. You can't just cancel that, because that drama is what makes the season. It's what gets people going. If we have to play behind closed doors, or we need to do like the MLB, where we're going to play in 5 specific arenas across the NHL, all the Canadian teams, 1 arena, all the East Coast teams, 1 arena. Sure, just get us the season back so we can see how this wraps up, because it is too close to call right now.
Max, I'm going to take the other side of the argument. I think the best solution is going straight into the playoffs. The hype will be off the charts. The fans will be energized, and they don't want the end of the regular season. They want the best hockey they can get. They want the playoffs. They're craving their favorite sport, so give them the best action they can get. However, you can't just put the 8 and 8 teams that are in the playoffs. You have to do some sort of extended playoff bracket where the Islanders, who are 1 point out, maybe get in on point percentage, as well as the Rangers and a few other teams that are kind of on the cusp. You need to do some sort of adapted strategy, but wasting the resources, wasting the time, and possibly putting players at risk to do some sort of end of the regular season round robin 3-city thing. No, you don't do that. You go straight to the playoffs. You give us our best hockey we can get, and you make some sort of accommodation to the playoffs.
Now, last question here, guys, before we throw it to an interview with Ken Danico. I mean, you're talking about going into those playoff times, and we've had an extended break here where a lot of players and a lot of teams have had to kind of just sit down and wait for that announcement to get back things going. What teams here, what players here benefit the most from this if they are to return from this extended break? Who's going to take advantage of it? I mean, there were a lot of teams, maybe the Winnipeg Jets were going through injury problems. Maybe they'll be back in full force. I know the Toronto Maple Leafs as well were doing that too. A lot of players were dealing with injury, but who benefits the most if they are to come back with this extended break?
In all honesty, Ryan, the teams that benefit the most are the teams that were already sitting in playoff positions or a point or 2 out. So that's your Boston Bruins, your New York Islanders. You're looking at your Colorado Avalanche, teams that, this break can keep you refreshed. Teams that are essentially, if you want to call it a lock-in already, they've already got the points. They're already going to be in. The question is just where they end up getting seated. You get that extended break. You can make sure everyone's healthy and then some. You get a little extra time to monitor guys who may be in a certain condition you don't know how to look at. And you can get ready to go for the playoffs with a more healthy team than just regular season ends, quick break, let's start the playoffs.
Health means everything during this stressful time, and it means everything on the ice too. The teams that have the most injuries are going to be the teams that benefit the most. The Carolina Hurricanes are missing Ryan Dzingel, Dougie Hamilton, Brett Pesce, James Reimer, Sammy Vatanen. They are a really good team that bought at the trade deadline that was just dealing with the injury bug. If the season returns, they're getting 5 of their better players back. That's a team that you have to look at that will be very scary come playoff time. And then their playoff opponent from last year in the second round, the New York Islanders, are missing Adam Pelech, Casey Cizikas, Johnny Boychuk, and even Josh Bailey and Tom Kuhnackel were day-to-day when the season ended. Those are 5 players on each team that are very good and very important members of those teams. Having those players back come playoff time will be very important. And someone else that's very important, that is Ken Danico, and we are very honored and happy to have him on the show. That was some great dialogue on the state of the NHL, and now we're very excited to welcome a 3-time Stanley Cup champion and the Devils color commentator, Mr. Devil, Ken Danico. So thank you so much for joining us today. Nice to see you.
My pleasure. How are you guys today? And I hope you can hear me. It's not breaking up. I was trying to listen to you guys a little bit.
We can hear you okay now.
Oh, boy. I'm breaking up a little bit here.
This is just my luck. Last week I had the same problem. But if you can hear me, are you all good?
I can hear you, and then it cut out. Let's give it a whirl here. But, geez, I hope it. I hear you. I hear you, David.
Okay, you hear me. So we've seen your boxing skills.
Oh, now I can't. Oh, boy.
Oh, terrible. Oh, well. Well, I'm going to type it in the chat that we have. Let's see if you can, we could do it that way.
Yeah, as long as you can hear me.
So, what have you been up to during break? We've seen you very active on social media.
Well, you mentioned about the boxing skills. That was a little bit for comic relief, but it's actually PSAs we're doing with the Devils, just trying to keep our fans engaged. And I know in these unprecedented times, things are very difficult for everyone, and we just pray and hope everybody's healthy and safe at the time. But and certainly that's the most important thing. But sports is such an avenue where people can forget about things for a little bit, have a little bit of a break as far as our worries and our thoughts along the way with these tough times. And like I said, so we try to keep engaged with the fans. And there was a few muscles pulled in that video of me boxing there. I still have it. I have the heart, and think I can do what I used to do, but I'm 56 years old, and sometimes I forget. Other than that, playing with my dogs a lot and hanging out at home and just hoping that eventually here we can move forward and have some simulation of Stanley Cup playoffs and somebody hoists the Stanley Cup.
And there have been a lot of encores of games on MSG networks. What have been your favorite games to catch up on that you played and commentated on?
All right, I got to put on my glasses since I have to read your some of your questions if we get cut off here, pal. Well, you know what? My favorite specific games, there's so many, obviously, during my playing days. And one that really stands out that was played on the Encore. Well, most of them have been played. So it's been a lot of fun. I have been watching a lot of Devils old-time games. I have not watched my former teams or teammates all that often since my career, since I retired from my playing days in 2003. And during this pandemic, yes, I've been able to catch up on a lot of great games and get that rush and get some goosebumps going again. And just great getting to see the great teammates that you played with. I mean, it's such fond memories. But I go back to 1988, game 80, last game of the year. There was only 80 games played. And the first time we made the Stanley Cup in Chicago, I was 23 years old. It was John McClain and a young Brendan Shanahan and Joe Sorella, Kirk Muller, Pat Verbeek, guys that we kind of went through a couple of real lean years in Jersey. And it was kind of a stepping stone, turning the corner, if you will, for the organization. Lou Lamoriello's first year. I mean, we celebrated like we'd won the cup because we really didn't know what to do or how to celebrate. We could not believe we made the playoffs, but it was raw, it was real, and that was as good a game as any for me to remember. And obviously the 3 Stanley Cups. I mean, that's what it's all about. I used to carry a garbage can over my head, a silver garbage can over my head as a kid playing road hockey in Western Canada. Your first dream is to play in the National Hockey League. Your second dream is is to hoist the Stanley Cup, to finally do it in 95 after, playing double-digit years with the Devils, along with Bruce Driver, Johnny Mack, and Johnny McLean. So it was gratifying for us. We went through some tough years, but to still be there and be able to come together as a group and play with the great teammates. And I'll tell you, any player that I know in 88, I thought we were going to be there all the time. We made the playoffs on the last day in overtime. Great run, win a couple rounds, end up going to Game 7, lose to Boston to go to the Stanley Cup final, and you think you're going to be there all the time. And when you're removed from the game and reflect, you understand how hard it really is to win. 7 years later, we win the Cup. But Lou Lamoriello had built such a strong organization, and we just had such a great group of guys every Stanley Cup year. From 95 to 2003, my last 8 years, it was Stanley Cup or bust. That's how high we raised the bar as an organization. Doesn't mean it's always going to work out, but we went to the Stanley Cup finals 4 times and lost one of those, and it was disappointing because we would have won back-to-back, lost in 7 to Colorado in 2001. But we had an opportunity, and that was just the strength of the organization and what Lou had built, and every player understanding their role, making sacrifices, all those memories, and watching these games, because we had a marathon of games. I think it was on April 25th or last Sunday of every final game right in a row. So I watched 6 hours of closing games in the Stanley Cup finals. It was pretty cool. And obviously when my career was winding down, 2003, in and out of the lineup, I was becoming an old man for hockey, young in general, but 39 years old at the time. And I got put back into Game 7 to go out on top. Was certainly a storybook ending for me. So many great moments, obviously. But for me, watching my teammates, I love watching old teammates. I go, oh, yeah, I almost forgot about how good he was, or how tough he was, or his character. It's so neat to see, guys, because obviously everybody goes on with their life, and, children, and sometimes move thousands of miles away. We don't get to see each other all the time, except for some reunions for the Stanley Cup teams. But it's just good to see some old teammates and see some games for sure.
So while you're adjusting to this new lifestyle of watching old games, the NHL is adjusting as well. What would be your advice to players missing hockey?
Well, I know, not even a comparison because of what we're going through right now. And I want to make sure I thank all the first responders, medical experts, doctors, nurses. They are the real heroes. And I had to get that in there before I answer this question, because we love those guys and so grateful to everybody. And certainly the New Jersey, New York metropolitan area has been hit so heavily. So they're doing the great work, and we're going to get through this. And you see it's getting a little bit better, and we're getting through it because of those people, certainly. But the adjustment, well, I'm trying, going back when we had lockouts and we sat out for 3 months, and that was before our first Stanley Cup. Didn't start the season, I believe, till the end of December, something like that, along those lines, or actually January. And we played 48 games that season. That was our first Stanley Cup. And obviously everything got back to normal because it was 4 rounds. And this is obviously uncharted waters for these guys. But when you're in it, it's tough to adjust, because one thing, you're an athlete, you're a hockey player. That's your drive, your focus. So these guys, when the season is abruptly stopped, it's a difficult adjustment. They don't know what to do with themselves. They don't understand kind of thing when you're younger. But like I said, looking back, is you do the best to stay occupied, keep yourself in shape, just in case there are games, and we hear that they're going to do everything they can in the National Hockey League. They're motivated to do that. First and foremost is the health of everybody, and so they will follow the guidelines of medical experts. But it sounds like there's a possibility, and they may not play till July. They may not play in front of any fans. These guys just want to play. So many people say, well, it's going to be so different. They're hockey players. They're athletes. This is what they want to do right now as a vet, because that's all they know is sports and being on the ice. Obviously, they get to spend a little time with their families and their young ones along the way, but they want to be out there playing hockey. And again, but they understand. These guys they're a little more intelligent, I think, than back in our day, or a little more adjusted, even at young ages of 19, 20, 21. They understand what's going on here in our life right now, and it's difficult. And you see them doing such great stuff, whether it's the league, whether it's individual players, whether it's teams. chipping in and helping out, donating time, money, and just trying to keep everybody positive. I know so many organizations, including the Devils, have done that during this pandemic.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was an honor and a pleasure to speak with you. I wish you luck in the rest of your quarantine and hope to see you back commentating on games for the Devils soon.
Well, I appreciate it, pal. Good luck to you guys. Hope to see you all back at school eventually here. And sorry about the little connection problem here, but a pleasure being on with you. Have a great night.
Thank you. That was a great interview with Ken Daneyko, a Devils legend, Mr. Devil, 3-time Stanley Cup champion. And that was a really fun time to talk with him about his memories in the past and looking forward to the future.
I mean, for me, it's always the great stories that you hear from players that played in the past, and just the fact, get the inside kind of scoop of what was going on. And it's definitely really interesting, David. The thing that really stood out to me, though, as well, there's the whole narrative about how, players don't want to come back if there aren't any fans. These are, at the end of the day, especially coming from a former player, they want to play hockey right now. They want to go out there. They're itching to play, albeit it needs to be at a safe time and obviously when everything is under control. But that narrative is absolutely bogus. I think these players, just like Ken said, just want to be playing hockey right now.
And Ryan, addressing that point, I don't think the players care about fans at all. What they care about more than the fan aspect, I think they care more about their families. You have players with newborn babies. Ken Daneyko has a lot of dogs that he's been showing on social media. They care more about their families and leaving their families than they do leaving their families to return to no fans. Fans or no fans, obviously, I'm sure they prefer to return to a jam-packed arena, but the players care about their family and their friends first. They are people just like us at the end of the day. So I think really ignoring that factor is unfair because they are humans too. So for me, the fans aren't as important as their lifestyles.
Absolutely. It may be a little bit weird having games without fans, but nonetheless, I think we'll all be a little bit happier being able to watch it on TV. I'm sure the athletes will be even more happier as well to be playing the game at that day level. David, thank you so much for bringing all the great stuff about the latest in the NHL and an awesome interview with Ken Daneyko, Mr. Devil himself. Always fantastic. But it's now time to shift over to the NBA and talk a little bit of hoops. We're going to bring on our very own, back on, Eddie Fitzgerald and Lou Akimano to talk about the latest in the NBA. Guys, great to have you back on. It's now talking about a little bit of basketball here, just like the NHL, though. We talked about the MLB and NFL, who are in a little bit different situation, but just like the NHL, they were abruptly stopped midway through the season. And I mean, it is tough. I mean, I was fully invested into the season. You guys know I am a Toronto Raptors fan. I was looking for that repeat, and I was excited to go on the ride with them again. Don't know how likely that would have been. Nonetheless, it would have been fun one to watch. Now we're abruptly taken away. Basketball is taken away from us. Let's hop right into kind of the developments here about how the NBA is approaching this, because it seems like this is the league that is the most proactive in terms of putting the things in place to get a season back going. You guys had mentioned, we talked about earlier, how they're probably going to be the first league to have workouts back in place here coming in May. But if they are to come back into the season, I know just like the NHL, there were a lot of teams that were racing for those last playoff spots. What is the best situation? What is the best way to go about this in terms of seeding those playoffs and going forward with the season, if there is going to be one?
Well, Ryan, first of all, I'm going to go through a couple of things with you. You're still NBA champions until somebody else is crowned, so you might want to wish for no season this year if you want to stay as the champion. And as a caveat to what you said about players being able to practice, that is only if the state itself has lifted the stay-at-home order. So not all teams will be created equally in this situation, and that's going to create a little bit of issues, and I think the NBA is going to sort of have to rein that in a little bit. I think as far as a playoff picture or potential playoff picture, as of right now, I just got done talking with Greg Logan of Newsday, who was on a conference call with Commissioner Adam Silver just a few days ago. And basically the commissioner was very remissive about letting information out. He was very adamant that this virus is constantly changing, that we don't know what is going to happen. Saying that there will be a season coming back is just not in the cards right now. Saying that a season will be canceled is just not in the cards right now, because we don't know how this is going to impact everybody, the players, and not only just the players who haven't tested positive for COVID-19, but the players like Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell who have tested positive for COVID-19, and how they will go on, and how the rest of the league sort of reacts to wanting to play against the Utah Jazz. I think that these are all questions that need to be answered before we even start discussing a playoff format.
Yeah, Eddie definitely hit all the nails on the head right over there. Commissioner Silver, he's just a brainiac in my opinion. He knows the ins and outs of what he wants to do with the situation. Talks about playing on ocean, on a boat, seeing if we can get the rest of the games in during the season. And that idea definitely didn't pan out. And now, May 1st, seeing if the at-home orders are lifted in these states, which they will be. And the fact that, we have a good chunk left of this season left that does define other teams' seeding for playoffs, especially for the Western Conference. You have the Portland Trailblazers. You have the Memphis Grizzlies with a young John Morant trying to lead his team into the playoffs as an 8th seed. And the fact that the Oklahoma City Thunder are playing exceptionally well, especially losing Russell Westbrook and Paul George to different teams over the offseason. There's just so much to think about. There's just Adam Silver has to be thinking, okay, what's my plan A? Okay, and there will never be a plan Z. We have to figure out what we have to do and execute it. And he's just been working his tail off for just to at least finish the season.
Well, I know all of us as basketball fans are waiting and trying to think and optimistically of having a basketball season, albeit when everything is safe to return. And I guess the logistics of how that actually gets put into place will be interesting on how Commissioner Adam Silver goes about it and how the NBA actually implements it in terms of seeding, in terms of whether they continue the season, the locations they may pick. It's going to be an interesting one, but there has been basketball content as of late that has been keeping us a little bit busy in terms of satisfying our sports craving. And one of those things is the Michael Jordan documentary that has been airing. They're now, I believe, at their finished 4 episodes in. MJ documentary, what are your guys' reaction to that and seeing and reliving the greatness that is what is arguably one of the greatest players of all time?
Well, I think that it certainly has bought into the GOAT campaign for Michael Jordan. A lot of the Michael Jordan lovers and non-Michael Jordan lovers are starting to really love Michael Jordan. But the biggest thing that MJ said before this documentary released was, "You will not like me after this documentary." And to me, I think that speaks volumes as somebody who has studied journalism. Typically in those last couple episodes, things sort of start to flip on its head. We saw that through one of the biggest documentaries released so far in Tiger King, how everything sort of started to shift away. And I think we're going to start to see that. I think it's going to be a Michael Jordan Tiger King situation where we really don't know what to think about Michael Jordan after these last 2 episodes have been released.
Ryan, I've been watching and rewatching this documentary, just these 4 episodes, and the fact that this was the team to beat in the 97-98 that year, and the way how they flash back to how everything started and they flash back forward, it's reminiscent. And the fact that you see everything unfold and come together for Michael Jordan and how it was a domino effect, and then you get Scottie Pippen. Okay, now you have Phil Jackson as head coach, and now you have Dennis Rodman, and you have all these pieces around this great championship high caliber team during this era where honestly, during that time you didn't think Michael Jordan was coming back, especially after his first retirement, and seeing how that happens. And you just see all this great content just unfold, and watching this unreleased footage for the first time, it's incredible. And I'm blessed to look at this team for at least for what it was back in the day, and especially now during this era where it's all just shooting threes. It's awesome.
And a quick comment there by Michael, who says, will we see some of these Last Dance documentaries for other players to kind of see what their, careers were like? And I think you may all agree with this as well. I mean, Michael Jordan was a little bit before our generation. We're living through that LeBron James kind of era right now. So we may not have the same appreciation of Michael Jordan, the greatness that he is, like some of the older people, like our parents, like the generation before us. So I think that is what it's putting things into perspective. And I think it'll be a great thing to have other players do something similar to that, because it allows us younger viewers to kind of experience fans and relive those great moments from great players that we maybe not appreciate it as much because it was past our time. It would be interesting, saying I like your point, Eddie. It does add to the campaign of the greatest of all time conversation. So there's definitely a little bit of a situation there where he's trying to get that leg up on LeBron James.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, Ryan, I agree with you. I think the next documentary is between Tiger Woods or Kobe Bryant. But enough talk about the documentary. We'll tune in on Sunday. Let's bring on sports director and anchor at News 12, the Bronx and Brooklyn, Pat O'Keefe. Pat,
gentlemen, how are you? Lou, what's going on, man? How you doing?
What's going on? Pat, to start off, what have you been up to during quarantine?
Well, we're still working over here at News 12. As you guys probably know from our sister station at News 12 Long Island, we're still producing content every night. Obviously, it's a little more challenging now and a little different way of going about it. A lot of interviews virtually, like the one that we're doing right now. And, rather than talking about, what's happening now and what's happening the present time, because as you know, nothing is happening the present time with the exception of that Last Dance documentary and the NFL draft last week. We're kind of going back in time and catching up with prominent athletes who we've covered through the years and having them share their stories for us, with us. We've spoken with a lot of athletes, whether they're in high school or whether they're in college, whose, as you know, seasons have been cut short because of the cancellation of sports during this coronavirus pandemic. So it's a different kind of coverage that we're producing nightly, but still very, very excited about what we've been working on.
Pat, you touched upon it a little bit. You've been working on all these projects during this time. On Twitter, I saw you sat down and interviewed one of our great senior guards, DeJour Bowie, and discussing how Hofstra made it to the NCAA tournament and how it, got taken away. What was it like interviewing DeJour? And I can only imagine there was just so much emotion during this time, especially for him working so hard during this tough season.
Well, he's so bummed out, as you can imagine, and everyone is bummed out because of the loss of sports. You are and I am, because we can't go home at the end of the day and watch a game. But think about a kid like DeJour Bowie. He's worked his entire 5-year college career to get to the NCAA tournament, and a couple of really disappointing losses in those early seasons when they thought they were going to go with Hofstra and couldn't quite get over the hump. Well, this year, his senior season, he's the leader on that team in every way, shape, and form. They get taken down to the wire again. It's Bowie this time who steps up to hit the biggest shot of the game with about 2 minutes left. They finally win that Colonial Championship. They're punching their ticket to the NCAA tournament. And then literally the day they get back to campus, the next day, the entire world has changed. And yes, I'm so happy for him, and I'm so happy for those kids at Hofstra that they got at least their chance to have their night to celebrate that championship, because a lot of schools didn't even get that. At least they knew they had qualified for the NCAA tournament. But he's a senior. He's never going to get to take the floor at the NCAA tournament. He's never going to get to go up against a number 4 or number 3 seed and maybe have them on the ropes with 3 or 4 minutes left with the entire arena cheering for the underdog. I mean, that's such a special part of March Madness and the sports landscape that, DeJour, and we know him and we've covered him, but thousands of athletes, hundreds of athletes across the country were deprived of that this year.
Pat, you hit it right on the head right there. The fact that Hofstra had it, DeJour had it, and his teammates, they left as champions. That's all you can really ask for, and end everything on a positive note. But you also mentioned as soon as the NCAA tournament was canceled, the fact that spring athletes got the green light to play another year if they wanted to, what does this mean for spring sports? And do you think this was the right move, especially after canceling that big tournament?
I think it was the right move because, they canceled the NCAA tournament, but it was just a tournament. A lot of team seasons were already over at that point, and everybody had gotten the opportunity to play a full season. This was more to help out the student athletes who more than half of their season was ripped away. Obviously, the outdoor, the spring track and field athletes, the lacrosse athletes, the baseball players, the softball players, those types of players. And I know they were keeping in mind specifically the seniors because it's no way for a career to end. I mean, look, we just talked about DeJour. Yeah, his career is over because of this, but he went out on top. Not a lot of college basketball players, unless you win the national championship, usually get to win their last game. But these spring athletes didn't even have this opportunity. Now, it's going to cause a lot of logistical tightrope walking in the future for these schools, because you already had athletes coming in to take these roster spots, and now all of a sudden, not all the athletes you thought that were going to graduate are going to be moving on. Some will. Some are going to still have jobs lined up and decide that they want to move on with their lives, but there's going to be a lot that take advantage of this extra year of eligibility, and each and every school is going to have challenges handling that.
You're right, Pat. The fact that they really do have the decision whether or not they do want to play, and the fact that they could either go to a different school even if they wanted to finish off. I don't know when this is all going to get settled for that. I mean, this is going to be a whole mess for a couple more seasons, in my opinion. But let's go shy away from college. Let's move on to professional sports. There's been a lot of talk especially with sports. People thought since sports were delayed, there won't be any news. Well, that's obviously false. You have the WNBA draft. You have the NFL draft. You have Tom Brady going to the Buccaneers, leaving away from the New England Patriots. You have Rob Gronkowski coming out of retirement. You have the Chicago Bulls documentary now. So much stuff has been happening. What has caught your interest out of all these topics?
Well, the three things that come to mind were all kind of new and fresh, and two of them were present-day events, the WNBA draft and, of course, the NFL draft. And the WNBA draft had extra special meaning around here this year because the Liberty had the number one pick for the first time, and there's this generational player, Sabrina Ionescu, there for the taking at number one. So that was a huge story, and we did a lot of coverage on her and on that leading up to the draft. And I think that's going to do wonders for women's basketball, not only in the WNBA, but right here in New York. Then you get to the NFL draft, and it's always a fun experience. But generally, from my perspective, it's the first round. Obviously, I'm glued to it. Second and third round, almost. And then by the Saturday, you're kind of moving on because it's in the middle of the NBA basketball playoffs. It's in the middle of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So your attention is elsewhere. This year, the NFL draft captured my attention for all 7 rounds. The only thing that was taking my attention away on Saturday was the fact that it was a gorgeous day outside, and we haven't had many of those. But that was a terrific viewing experience. And the Last Dance. And you guys were talking, and obviously all of that stuff happened before your time as sports fans. That was prime time for me. I mean, I graduated high school in 1997 here in New York, so I was a diehard Knicks fan. So I took the brunt of how great that team was really for the entire decade of the 90s, my peak years as a sports fan. But getting the opportunity to go back and relive that team and relive who I have always said and continue to say is unquestionably the greatest player of all time has been so enjoyable for me.
Now, Pat, you kind of cover it all. You cover high school, you cover the collegiates, and then you also cover a little bit of professional. What do you enjoy covering the most? Yeah,
I enjoy covering what I'm covering that day, and I've had unbelievable experiences, covering all of them. On the field, 2009, when the Yankees win the World Series against the Phillies. I mean, as a kid growing up in Yonkers, New York, how can you beat that experience, getting the opportunity to cover that? I've been on the court for some court stormings for LIU Brooklyn and Manhattan College, teams that punched their ticket to the NCAA tournament. Getting the opportunity to cover that and be in the middle of that celebration and that environment is awesome. I tell people this all the time. The coolest sporting event still to this day I've ever had the chance to cover was 2008. It was the annual Turkey Bowl between Mount St. Michael and Cardinal Hayes. Coming into the game, Mount St. Michael had won that rivalry 28 years in a row. No one thought there was any chance that Cardinal Hayes was going to win that day either. And then all of a sudden, Hayes is hanging with them the entire game. And then they pull away in the fourth quarter. And the wave of emotion from the Cardinal Hayes sideline, players, current students, family members, alumni going back 20, 30, 40 years that they had finally broken this losing streak. I've gotten the opportunity to cover a lot of events. That's still the most emotion I've ever seen at a sporting event. So I love the emotion. I love the stories. And as you know, covering sports provides that all the time.
You're right, Pat. Hopefully we can see more emotion, more stories unfold when this hiatus is over. I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. And, thank you so much. Have a nice night.
You guys are doing a great job under these circumstances. I really enjoyed the show, so keep up the good work.
Thank you, Pat. All right, Ryan, that was Pat O'Keefe of News 12 Brooklyn and the Bronx, sports anchor.
Interesting conversation as always. I mean, all of our guests that we had on this evening have been fantastic, telling us the inside scoop of kind of everything that's going through. And I think the biggest takeaway, especially for us as aspiring broadcasters, has been how they're getting through these troubling times and really making the most of it. And you know, you just got to look at the silver lining of everything and get through it all together, because I think we'll all come out on the other side a little bit stronger here as we just about wrap up this show. Well, that will do it again for another edition of Sports Beats. Thank you to all our amazing analysts as we bring them on. Lou, you did a fantastic job with the interview there as well. And of course, Max, fantastic job bringing all the heat when it comes to NHL. Eddie Fitz, always bringing the heat. And of course, Louis Grosso. And last but not least, David Lazar will join us shortly. But then again, also thank you to all of our special guests, Keith Irizarry, Daniel McCartan, Ken Danico, and Pat O'Keefe. Make sure to tune in next week at the same time, same place for our final show of the semester. But until then, I'm your host, Ryan Yee, signing off. Stay safe, stay healthy, and always roar with pride.
We got it this time.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Let's go.
Right on. Roll Pride.